Prof, 2019 is just around the corner, and Nigerians are concerned whether there will be free, credible, and transparent elections. How prepared is INEC this time for 2019 elections?
Well, thank you very much for that question. The Commission is prepared to give Nigerians free, fair, credible, transparent, and I want to assure Nigerians also the best election ever. We have taken time to prepare for the 2019 elections. Well ahead of the elections, we have our strategic plan, strategic program of action, and the election project plan. All ready, discussed at stakeholder meetings, validated, published, and circulated. So in terms of the actual planning for the election, I'm certain that we are on course. Then there are the details of what we do for elections. What about the facilities that we are going to use to conduct the elections? What is the status of our smart card readers? What have we done in response to some of the criticisms and suggestions for improvement that we had from Nigerians? We have taken into consideration a lot of the complaints from the field and the suggestions by Nigerians to ensure that we have vastly improved functional smart card readers. We have conducted stress tests on all the smart card readers nationwide, and we are good to go. We have taken stock of all the ballot boxes, all the voting cubicles. We have taken stock of the printers that will be used to print the voter registers for the election. And we have also embarked for the first time in the history of this country the continuous voter registration exercise on a truly continuous basis, beginning from April 27th last year, and is ongoing as we speak. We have tasked our resident electoral commissioners in the states to also examine the number of ad hoc staff we need to engage for the elections. We are looking at the manuals and regulations for the 2019 general elections. We are also taking into consideration the requirements for training, and above all, we're engaging with Nigerians by way of sensitization for the purpose of planning the elections. The elections has been well planned, more than all the elections in the past. Recall that on the 9th of January this year, the Commission released the timetable and schedule of activities for the 2019 elections. It has never been done in the history of elections in Nigeria where the timetable is released a year to the election. We did it deliberately so that there will be certainty in the calendar for the 2019 elections, such that will allow the Electoral Commission to plan properly. The media like you will also plan properly. Civil society organizations that deploy to observe elections will plan properly. The security agencies will also have an opportunity to plan. So in all, we are confident that given the measures that we have put in place, there will be a pleasant voter experience for Nigerians in 2019.
What are the challenges you are currently confronting INEC?
Well, there aren't challenges that are not surmountable. There are challenges, obviously, but we are addressing the challenges as we go along. One of which is the size of the ballot paper for the 2019 general elections. As Nigerians know, we now have 68 registered political parties. As at last week, we had 131 fresh applications from associations for registration as political parties. We envisage that by the time we go into the 2019 general elections, we may well have as many as 80 political parties contesting, which will be the highest number of political parties in the history of our democracy. But what we intend to do is to ensure that we have a ballot paper that is easily readable, easily understandable by the voters, and will engage big time in voter education and voter mobilization for the elections. For instance, in the last Anambra governorship elections, we had a record number of 37 political parties contesting. In the forthcoming Ekiti governorship elections, we have 35 political parties contesting. So we looked at the single column ballot paper that we deployed in previous elections and realized that it may not be appropriate for the 2019 general elections. So like Anambra, we may end up with 2 columns, 3 columns. But as we did in the case of Anambra, we also engaged big time to sensitize the voters on the position of political parties in relation to their logo and where citizens are supposed to thumbprint on election day to cast their ballots. And we had no much problem in that respect in Anambra. We don't envisage to have any big challenge in 2019. But as I said, we'll engage big time with Nigerians so that people will know the position of the political parties on the ballot papers. The next challenge is managing the size of the ballot boxes that we have, because the bigger the size of the ballot paper, obviously the bigger the ballot boxes that we require. But given the number of columns that we wish to introduce on the ballot papers, we are confident that the 40-liter ballot boxes that we have at the moment will be adequate for the elections in 2019.
So in terms of preparedness as far as logistics is concerned, INEC is prepared?
We are prepared. We are prepared to go ahead with the sensitive material and the non-sensitive. We are prepared, and then we hope by the end of this month in Lagos, we're going to have a major conference on electoral logistics. You know, one of the major challenges is logistics. The forward logistics on election day, a reverse logistics on election day after voting. We need to engage big time with the logisticians, the transporters and others, including the participation of the Chartered Institute of Logistics in Nigeria, so that we'll deploy and ensure that polling units open at 8 o'clock on February 16th and March 2nd for the general elections next year.
Underage voting has been an issue, a scandal, especially the Kano scandal. And the reactions coming from INEC, INEC is absolving itself. What do you have to say? What's your reaction?
Well, my first reaction is that the Kano local government election was not the statutory responsibility of the Commission. We have no constitutional responsibility for conducting the election. Our responsibility was to make the voter register available to the Kano State Electoral Commission for the conduct of election. But the Kano State Electoral Commission was entirely responsible for the conduct of that election. And after the election, pictures surfaced on the social media that ineligible persons, meaning persons below the statutory age of 18, voted in that election. We conducted an inquiry, and our inquiry was simple: to establish the connection, if any, between the alleged underage voting in Kano and the INEC voter register. And we didn't find the connection, because in virtually all cases, in all the polling units, the voter register was not even used in the first instance. So if the voter register wasn't used, but people thumbprinted in narrow alleyways and in all manner of places, that cannot be blamed on INEC. This is more so because in July 2017 also we conducted an election into a state constituency in Kano called Minjibir. And in that election conducted by INEC, there wasn't a single incidence of underage voting, because there was accreditation and the voter register was used. But having said this, let me come back to this issue of the voter register. Okay. Recall that in previous elections, there was a fresh voter registration with every general election in this country until 2010, when the last commission decided to introduce the full biometric voter register, in which case the core of the register used for the 2015 general elections was the register used in the 2011 general election, updated in 2014 for the 2015 general elections. Yeah. When the State Electoral Commission in Kano conducted the local government elections, this commission at that time had not added a single name to the voter register inherited for the 2015 general elections. So it was the same register. It's a robust register. It has produced different outcomes between 2011 and 2015. And the commission made available a copy of the voter register to the Kano State Independent Electoral Commission for the purpose of the election. But speaking generally about the voter register, this is clearly the most robust database of citizens in this country. As we speak, we have 70 million entries. In fact, by the time you add the new registrants from the continuous voter registration exercise before major elections, governorship elections, and the major of continuous voter registration exercise we conducted in 2017, it is well over 70 million, complete with pictures, biometrics, names, addresses, and telephone numbers of citizens. Now, nobody in INEC has ever said that the voter register is perfect, but it is clearly a national treasure. If there are issues with the voter register, yes, we should clean the voter register up, but not to throw away the baby with the bathwater.
So the question,
what are the processes?
Let me now ask, based on that, sir, I mean, why is INEC not cleaning the voters register at this time, considering the fact that
INEC has consistently cleaned up the voter register. It's a continuous process. And let me describe the processes.
Was an investigative audit done on the voters register that was given to Kano?
We have always done audits, not necessarily on the voter register given to Kano or any state for the purpose of conducting local government elections. But there are mechanisms by which the voter register is cleaned up. And in cleaning up the voter register, INEC also enlists the support of citizens and the political parties. Section 12 of the Electoral Act is very clear.
Yeah.
On eligibility for registration. You have to be a citizen of Nigeria, you have to be resident where you are registered, you have to be above the statutory age of 18 before you are registered. But once we do the registration, the Commission is required by law to display the register for claims and objections. This is to enable citizens to look at the register and help the Commission to clean that up. And INEC has consistently displayed the register. But ironically, we have not received a single complaint from citizens on the prevalence of ineligible persons on the register. Not only that, the law also requires the Commission to make available copies of the voter register to political parties. If, for instance, we do continuous voter registration exercise in 2017, the law requires that 60 days into the new year, that is 2018, we should make a copy of all new registrants to each registered political party in the country. And I'm happy to say that in February, this year, we made available the register to each of the 68 registered political parties. We are waiting for the political parties to come up with some ideas or suggestions or complaints or observations on ineligible persons on the register. We haven't heard from citizens. But we have been on our own looking at the register. Where there is need for us to null names, we have nulled names. Not long ago, we removed about 200 names from the register based on the report we received from the Nigeria Immigration Service of non-Nigerians who registered under false pretense. The law says that it's only open to Nigerian citizens. And we have removed the names from the register. Similarly, we have approached the National Population Commission, which is the agency responsible for the registration of birth and death in Nigeria, to avail us of the names of Nigerians who died since the last exercise so that we can remove the names from the register. And they promised to cooperate with us and make available the information. In addition, the Commission in 2013 engaged a number of officers called the Registration Area Officers, RAOs, who live in each of the 8,809 wards nationwide, who, because they live in community, will now hear from the community the number of Nigerians who are unfortunately dead for the purpose of cleaning up the voter register. So we have our own internal mechanisms for cleaning up the voter register. There is the requirement of the law to throw up the register for citizens' contribution to cleaning it up by way of claims and objections. And then we're also working with statutory agencies of government to see how they can help to clean up the register. So there are various mechanisms. We have been doing that.
Great. For every electoral body, there are some elements or bad elements within the system that that oftentimes compromise the process. What is INEC doing in this regard? Why have INEC not prosecuted those who may have, one way or the other, compromised elections?
Well, INEC, particularly this INEC, has done everything possible to ensure the integrity of the election managers. Remember, the integrity of an election begins with the credibility of the managers of the election.
That's right.
In Kano, for instance, we conducted a by-election into a state constituency. Because of violence, we had to suspend the election under Section 26 of the Electoral Act. As a result of which, working with the police, we prosecuted over 40 electoral offenders successfully. This is the highest number of successful prosecution of electoral offenders ever in the history of the Commission. Again, arising from the 2015 general elections, the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, the EFCC, made available to the Commission information on staff of the Commission, some serving, some retired, who were complicit in the 2015 general elections. And for the first time in the history of the Commission, we interdicted 205 staff, the highest number of interdiction in the history of the Commission. And arising from the run elections in Rivers, some of our staff are facing prosecution as we speak. But I wish to say that while we are doing that and will continue to do so, among the staff of the Commission are some of the most conscientious Nigerians, if you consider the kind of situation under which the Commission works. So we have recognized excellence where we needed to do so, and we have also condemned staff who run foul of the law for all manner of infractions. So we are determined to ensure that only those with the required level of credibility participate in conducting elections in this country. And I want to assure Nigerians that we'll never let the nation down on this score. We'll continue to commend where we need to do so, but to condemn in equal measure where we need to condemn staff involved in what they are not supposed to be involved in during elections.
How are you handling the interference of politicians in INEC? Are you under any pressure at this point in time?
I have been asked this question several times. I have never been under any pressure at all. My conscience is very clear in the kind of work that I do. INEC will never succumb to any pressure. We are committed to ensuring that elections are not only free and fair but credible, and we'll continue to work on the side of Nigerians and not on the side of political gladiators.
If there are attempts at blackmailing you, for example, what happens?
Well, the truth will always set one free. If anybody wishes to blackmail, you cannot stop people from blackmailing. But I will never succumb to blackmail or succumb to any pressure. As far as the sacred responsibility of ensuring there is fairness and equity in the system is concerned, I'm committed to that. I have a job to go back to. I always say that I'm a lecturer in the university. I go back to the best profession in the world, which is the teaching profession. So while I am privileged to serve in this capacity, there will never be compromise.
Some of the opinion that an issue of blackmail, for example, might be linked to your stay when you were the executive secretary of TETFUND. You've not actually made any statement as far as that is concerned. If there is an investigative audit is to be done on the contracts awarded by you while you are at TETFUND, will that affect your decisions as far as that?
To begin with, while I was privileged to serve as executive secretary of the Education Trust Fund and later the Tertiary Education Trust Fund, TETFUND, we maintained its integrity as a funding agency. We never engaged in transactions. Contracts were never awarded by TETFUND. And I want to underscore this point because so many people think that it was a cash cow for the award of contracts. What we did was to allocate available resources on the basis of the sharing formula enshrined in the act establishing the agency. The benefiting institutions were responsible based on the allocations given to them annually to propose their projects, engage their contractors, vendors, and suppliers, and they paid them from the fund that we disbursed to them. Our responsibility was to ensure that the processes and procedures were followed, projects monitored, and funds disbursed based on performance. And that's why I'm so happy to say that for the period I was privileged to serve, there wasn't a single abandoned project anywhere sponsored by TETFUND. Not only that, visit some of the campuses of our tertiary institutions. Much of what you see is TETFUND intervention. Not only in terms of fiscal projects, but also in terms of learning resources, as well as capacity building for academic and non-academic staff. So I have worked in INEC just as I worked, I have worked at TETFUND in very clear conscience. And the record is there for all to see.
So if an investigative audit was to be done, you will subscribe to it?
I welcome any investigation on any matter, for that matter, relating to not only my tenure at TETFUND, but also anywhere I served previously.
Good. Based on Ekiti elections, the gubernatorial elections holding in July, and the intense heat that is happening in Ekiti right now, how does INEC intend to handle security issues, especially as it relates to that election?
Well, in Ekiti, just like the other governorship elections we conducted, I remember there are 7 governorship elections in Nigeria that are conducted off-season. We have done 5 to our outstanding Ekiti and Osun. Our preparations are more or less the same as the preparations for previous elections. Take the case of the security environment, for instance. Okay. That is beyond the immediate responsibility of the Commission. Somebody has to secure the environment for us to deploy.
Great.
But as far as the preparation for the election is concerned, in relation to the responsibilities of INEC, we are ready for the Ekiti election. The election is going to be conducted in the 16 local government areas of the state. We have 147 wards. We have quite a number of polling units. We have been meeting with officials of the Commission in Ekiti State to appraise the security situation, to look at the resources required for the election, as well as all the facilities we need to deploy for the election. Very soon, the Commission is going to hold a meeting of the Interagency Consultative Committee on Election Security, (ICSES). This involves the police as the lead agency and all other military and paramilitary institutions and organizations are members of the ICSES. This is the body responsible for appraising the security situation and deploying security for the purpose of the elections. I'm confident that the security agencies will do their own part in securing the environment for the election. But as far as the preparations are concerned on the part of the Commission, we are good to go even at this point for the Ekiti governorship election.
I crave your indulgence. Sometimes I have to move back and forth. Considering what happened in Kano, 2015, the then Commissioner of Police then was the present. He's the present IGP. A lot of Nigerians are, so to say, in quote, worried about what will happen in the general elections come 2019. How do you intend to plug the rigging loopholes that was envisaged?
Well, in the case of the integrity of the processes, there will be increasing deployment of technology, which has helped to reduce the human interface in the conduct of elections.
Could you expatiate on that, Prof?
First, in 2015, the Commission deployed the permanent voter card, which for the first time in our election, we had a machine-readable card. The Commission also deployed the smart card readers for the purpose of authentication and confirmation. The smart card readers confirm that the cards are actually issued by the Commission, not cloned, that the person who presents the card at the polling unit is the real owner of the card and not somebody else. And then we use the thumbprints to authenticate the ownership of the card before voting takes place. We have studied all the issues and challenges arising from the deployment of the smart card readers in 2015, and we are going to improve on that in 2019. In fact, interestingly, in the last by-election we conducted in Ibarapa East in Oyo State, we deployed the enhanced smart car readers. And we had little challenge actually on the deployment of the smart car readers in that election. So we are determined to ensure that the elections are credible. We are determined to ensure that the elections are better. But beyond that, as I said, we are going to work with the security agencies to secure the environment. But we are also taking steps to empower citizens. The Commission believes in what we call citizens' mandate protection. And that's why in 2015, you would probably notice that at each polling unit, after casting ballots were counted and the result pasted at the polling units. But we used plain sheets, cardboards to do so. But this time around, we specifically and deliberately designed a form called the EC60E, which we jokingly say is the citizens' result sheet. At the end of the election, the result for that particular polling unit will be recorded. You'll have the names of the candidates contesting for that particular election. You'll have the total number, the votes scored in words and in figures. We have even provided a column for party agents to sign. After the election, we'll paste the result at each polling unit. The idea is that citizens using cheap technology like WhatsApp can take a snapshot of that poster. And if they have their own situation rooms, they can easily, quickly calculate. They can tally the figures. And before the end of the election, citizens will be in a better position to know who has won, who has lost the elections. In fact, I want to say that it's very interesting these days that elections are increasingly going beyond the capacity of even the electoral commissions to manipulate. Because before the official announcement of results, citizens will know what actually transpired at each polling unit. My appeal to citizens is that they should continue to avail themselves of this opportunity so that citizens not only vote on election day, but they should also protect their mandate.
Let's go to the campaign finances, for example. What's INEC actually doing in terms of more probity in this instance, in terms of parties' campaign finances?
Well, there are two dimensions to our question.
Good.
One is party finance. That's the amount of money political parties spend as political parties. The second dimension is expenditure by candidates contesting in the election. And you know there are limits placed by the Electoral Act on the amount of money that an individual can spend. In a presidential election, for instance, is 1 billion, not more. And there are also limits as to what individuals can contribute and corporate bodies to the campaigns of individuals or political parties. It's a lot more difficult tracking both. In the case of party finance, INEC is required by law to audit the accounts of political parties. And we have been doing so annually. And to make the outcome of that public. In fact, for the one that we concluded after 2015, we'll soon make that public. But it's a lot more difficult to track individual spending. Because if you take advert on, say, newspapers, for instance, you can quickly calculate, you know, the advert rate for a full page in color in a newspaper. And you can take all the adverts by a particular candidate and calculate. But, you know, the candidates hardly own up to some of the adverts. Some are placed by support groups. Some are by friends. But if you calculate, you know, they will be within the limits of what the law allows. But we, not long ago, had an interaction with the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission because they have greater capacity to track campaign finance. And they have not only capacity but statutory responsibility. So we sought for the support of the EFCC in this regard, not only in tracking individual and party campaign finance, but also in tracking the worrisome occurrence of money moved to the polling units on election day to bribe voters. We are working very closely with the EFCC to ensure that we minimize that. Ours should be a democracy of the people, by the people, for the people, and not a plutocracy. We are also looking into the administration of the polling units on election day, such that it's not easy, or it won't be easy for individuals to cast their votes and somehow indicate the party that they voted for the purpose of
accounting
for the purpose of those who wish to influence the process to know and to meet them. But ultimately, it is the security that we are going to work very closely with. There is a lockdown on election day, or what we call restriction of movement in Nigeria. But how come that some vehicles are allowed to move on election day and to carry money? So this is going to be a major issue of discussion in our next meeting of the Interagency Consultative Committee on Election Security. And I want to assure Nigerians that we are going to see a big change in that respect from the governorship election in Ekiti. We will never allow our election to be compromised by money bags.
That's great. Candidates can decide not to participate or partake in political debates organized by independent bodies. Is INEC looking at making participation in statutory recognized debates a prerequisite election?
First, there is no legal requirements for INEC to organize any debate anyway. And debates are normally organized by bodies other than the election management bodies. So electoral commissions don't organize debates. And I'm not aware also of any statutory provision in any of our laws to make participation in debates compulsory. But, you know, citizens listen to candidates when they debate, and this helps them to make up their minds on election day.
Yeah.
Maybe the penalty for those who don't participate is that they will lose the opportunity for citizens to listen to them and probably persuade them. And so the consequence may be in the decision that citizens take on election day rather than some statutory provision or statutory response to these matters. There is no law that says that someone must participate in an election debate, and if the person does not participate, then there will be consequences. There isn't that statutory provision. Not in Nigeria, not in any country that I know of.
But is INEC looking at that direction?
Well, we don't organize debates. So it's very difficult to say that, oh, we should not insist that citizens must participate in conducting debates. The good thing is that there are debates happening at different levels. Some organized by the media, for instance, some television stations in this country on their own have organized debates whenever we conduct big-time elections, like governorship elections, for instance. And then, you know, that is the instrumentality of the Nigerian Election Debates Group through the Broadcasting Organization of Nigeria. But these are different bodies doing what they are supposed to do as citizens. We support that. Citizens should, candidates should participate in debates. The whole purpose of democracy is to sell to citizens the ideas that you have, so that citizens can take informed decisions when they vote on election day. But there's no statutory provision to say that if you don't participate in debates, these are the consequences, or that INEC is supposed to take some steps to ensure that candidates participate in debates. But we encourage candidates to participate.
Interesting. One other issue that has been of concern has to do with electronic voting system. Why is INEC not ready for electronic voting system come 2019?
Well, I think the electoral legal environment has now empowered the Commission to do so. And I believe that electronic voting is just a matter of time. It's not a matter of if, it's a question of when. Unfortunately, between now and the 2019 general election, there is no time to get the electronic voting machines to 120,000 polling units nationwide to do the voter education and what have you to deploy.
But wasn't this factored in by preparation?
Yeah, but it's a mechanism. Because, you know, sometimes people think that electronic voting is what happens with the machine on election day. Electronic balloting is just a stage in the chain for electronic voting.
That's true.
Electronic voting starts with the electronic voter register, and we have the biometric voter register. Thereafter, you go into electronic accreditation of voters, and the Commission is doing so using the PVC and the smart card readers. Next, you go into electronic balloting, where citizens ballot using the electronic voting machines. Next is electronic collation, and then electronic transmission of results. In the Commission now, we have achieved the first two critical goals: electronic voter register and electronic accreditation of voters. And we are pioneering and piloting electronic collation and electronic transmission of results. Once we are satisfied and comfortable with these four processes, we can then coalesce them into a machine called electronic voting machine that citizens can now use to actually ballot. So we are approaching the matter systematically. As I said, it's not a question of when or if, it's a question actually of when we are going to deploy. I believe the next general election, not 2019 general election, must have some elements of electronic voting. That's the way to go.
I crave your indulgence if I have to take you back. Focus will be shifted, the attention will be shifted on the elections, and the issue of vote selling, vote buying is still a fundamental issue that earlier on you talked about having meetings with security agencies in order to see what can be done in order to mitigate that. But for Ekiti election, what actions will be taken in order to prevent vote selling? Okay,
let me basically say three things on this matter. The first one is enforcement, and this has to be done by the security agencies. So I go back to the point I made earlier, that there has to be involvement of the security agencies.
No doubt about that.
The second responsibility is the administration of the polling units in such a way that the choices of citizens are not obvious to those who move money to the polling units to influence the actions of citizens on election day, such that between where you place the voting cubicles and where you place the ballot boxes, there shouldn't be that kind of gap that allows those who wish to compromise the elections to know who has voted for what. Remember, the law says that the voting is in secret, and that's why we have the voting cubicles where you thumbprint the ballot papers, but then you have to drop the ballot paper into the ballot box in the open. The third, equally very important step that we need to take is continuous voter education and voter sensitization. There cannot be a buyer where there is no seller. So increasingly, I see if citizens, for instance, are determined that their votes must count irrespective of any extraneous influences, the better for us. So we need to also engage, and we'll continue to do so, and we'll do so in Ekiti elections. We'll also talk to the security agencies. We'll look at the administration of the polling units.
Final words for Nigerians, Prof.
Well, my commitment to Nigerians is that 2019 elections will be a pleasant experience for citizens. We are determined that only the votes cast by Nigerians will determine who wins in an election. And we have demonstrated this in one by-election after another by-election. The most recent example, for instance, is the Anambra governorship election, where the votes cast by citizens truly counted. And this is a pointer to the 2019 general elections. On a concluding note, let me also say this, that after every major election, so many people say it is a litmus test for the Commission. We are still going through the test. I don't know when we will eventually pass the litmus test. But I thought that we passed the litmus test in Anambra, only for me to read somewhere that somebody say, Ekiti is going to be a litmus test. I'm sure Oshun will also be a litmus test. So as far as INEC is concerned, I think we have passed the litmus test, and will continue to jealously guard our independence as a commission. We will continue to behave in a manner that guarantees the sanctity of the ballot, the freeness and fairness of the process. And on these matters, there will never be any compromise. So I assure Nigerians they should take free, fair, and credible elections in 2019 actually for granted, as far as those responsibilities that the Commission is supposed to discharge are concerned. We will never fail Nigerians.
Prof, thank you very much for the insightful analysis.
Thank you, and my great pleasure. Thank you.